Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and it's time to get Series 12 of the TTT underway as we start Week 89 with another Middle-earth Map Monday. After 12 weeks wandering through the rolling hills, grassy plains, and mountain vales of Rohan, it's time to move into the Kingdom of Gondor, starting with the land of Anórien. Now, many of you know Anórien as the region of Gondor that lies north of the White Mountains, between Minas Tirith and Rohan. But let's get into a bit more detail, and for this, I want to go to the chapter, The Rivers and Beacon Hills of Gondor, found in the Nature of Middle-earth. There we read that when Elendil took as his dwelling the North Kingdom, owing to his friendship with the Eldar, and committed the South Kingdom to his sons, they divided it so, as is said in ancient annals. Isildur took as his own land all the region of Arnen, but Anórien took the land from Erui to Mount Mindolluin, and thence westward to the North Wood, later in Rohan called the Firian Wood. But Gondor, south of Ered Nimrais, they held in common. Now, we'll get into Arnen later. For now, I'll just explain that it is an older name for a large part of what we now know as Ithilien. We do still see the name in Emin Anarnen, the hills south of Osgiliath that forced the Anduin to curve west before heading south again to the sea. Anyway, Arnen was what Isildur took, but it was what Anórien took that we want to take a look at today. And the text says that he took the land from Erui to Mount Mindolluin and thence westward to the North Wood. Now, Erui, which we'll talk about when we get to the rivers of southern Gondor another time, is the easternmost of the 5 rivers of Lebanon. It has its source near Mindolluin, and it runs south through Listarnach, flowing into the Anduin about 75 miles to the south of Minas Tirith. That means that Anórien originally included Minas Tirith and that wedge of land between the Erui and the Anduin rivers. Now, the unfinished index suggests much the same. In the entry for Gondor, it explains the region of Anórien lies between Entwash and the White Mountains, and all the land between west of Anduin, from Rauros to River Erui. The grant of Calenardhon to the Eotheod in 3rd Age 2510 changed the borders a bit. The story of Cirion and Eorl, found in Unfinished Tales, explains that the border between the new kingdom of Rohan and Gondor would be the Anduin and the west cliff of the Emin Muil, down to the marshes of the mouths of Onodlo, that's the Entwash, and beyond that river, the stream of the Glanhir, that's the Mering stream, that flowed through the wood of Anwar, that's the Firian Wood, to join the Onodlo. So now you have a relatively clear picture in your minds of the bounds of Anórien, both when it was established and late in the Third Age. Not only does the region contain Minas Tirith and the surrounding lands, but it also contains the Druadan Forest, the Beacons of Gondor, which we will get to, I promise, and a big section of the Great West Road. But some history about the region first. Like much of the lands of Gondor, the region was originally occupied by men of pre-Númenórean ancestry, and was later also home to the Druidine, or the Woses, Khan Buri Khan's ancestors. That was at the end of the Second Age that the region became known as Anórien, named after Anarion, younger son of High King Elendil. Now, we may eventually do a full Word Nerd Wednesday workup, but for now it suffices to say that Anórien is composed of the Sindarin word Anor, meaning sun, and the ian suffix, or ian, for land or country, like in Ithilien, Lorien, and Beleriand. Hence, sunlending in the language of the Rohirrim. Now, back to its history briefly. It's mentioned as a region of Gondor that remained loyal to Eldacar when he was overthrown by Castamir the Usurper in the Kinstrife. That's 3rd Age 1432 to 1447. Specifically, in Appendix A, we read, "Thus he, Castamir, had been king only 10 years, when Eldacar, seeing his time, came with a great army out of the north, and folk flocked to him from Calenardhon and Anórien and Ithilien. There was a great battle in Lebanon at the crossings of the Erui, that's in Anórien at the time, in which much of the best blood in Gondor was shed." Now, there's no specific mention of Anórien in relation to the Great Plague that reached Gondor in 1636, but we know that neighboring Calenardhon was essentially abandoned. There is an indirect mention of Anórien when we read about the moving of the capital from Osgiliath to Minas Anor in Appendix A. Few of those who had fled from the plague into Ithilien or to the western Dales were willing to return, Anórien being, of course, the western Dales. Anórien gets another mention in relation to the steward Turin II, who ruled from 3rd Age 2882 to 2914. Also in Appendix A, we read that Turin, who was also the steward that built Henneth Anún, also fortified again the Isle of Caerandros to defend Anórien. And, speaking of Caerandros, during the War of the Ring, another of Sauron's armies sent from the Morannon overwhelmed Caerandros and flowed into Anórien. Theoden and his forces were told about them by Han Brychan. "But Gorgon and men out of far away," he waved a short, gnarled arm eastward, "sit on Horse Road. Very many, more than horsemen." Rohan's own scouts had seen them as well, with Theoden observing that they had already cast trenches and stakes across the road. "We cannot sweep them away in sudden onset." Those enemy forces didn't remain, however. In the last debate, it was decided that the main strength of the Rohirrim that remained, horsed and able to fight, some 3,000 under the command of Elfhelm, should waylay the West Road against the enemy that was in Anórien. And that's about it for Anórien itself as a region. Next week, we're going to take a look at the Beacon Hills of Gondor that all make their home in Anórien. For now, though, folks, that wraps it up for Middle-earth Map Monday. Now, eventually, I want to get back to Mailbag Mondays, so if you have questions for me, please email them to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com, and be sure to let Barliman know that your question is for today's Tolkien Times. To those of you who support the TTT on Patreon, thank you. Your support gives me the ability to just pour the time and resources into researching, writing, and recording these episodes. Now, if you're not yet supporting the show, please consider visiting patreon.com/Tolkien Times. You can join the TTT Content Council to have input on what I'm going to talk about each series. You can get a bonus episode every week and more. And everybody, please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we return to the revised letters for a series of Tolkien Tuesdays. Podcast listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your apps. For those on YouTube, like and subscribe to get all of the PPP productions, including the back catalog of the PPP, along with my streaming show, The PPP Plays. And be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.